In the pale hour before dawn, when the world still holds its breath, there is a kind of stillness that belongs to deep time. Not the stillness of absence, but of waiting, the way a tide waits before turning, the way a forest waits beneath snow. Somewhere beneath the crust of this ancient planet, heat moves in slow rivers, older than any name we have given to the rock above. And in that movement, in that patient pulse of stone and mantle, a rhythm persists, one that has outlasted every creature that ever walked or swam or drifted through the air. The earth has known many beginnings. It has also known endings, great quietings when the chorus of life fell to a whisper, when forests became memory and oceans emptied of their familiar shapes. We call these moments extinctions, and we often speak of them as tragedies, as accidents of fate, as unlucky collisions between biology and catastrophe. But what if they were something else entirely? What if the vanishing of species was not a flaw in the design, but part of the design itself? A rhythm woven into the fabric of geological time, as natural as the turning of seasons, as certain as the cooling of a star. The first light touches the rim of an ancient sea. Somewhere in the sediment below, the compressed remains of trilobites rest in perfect silence, their exoskeletons folded into the dark ledger of the earth. They flourished for nearly 300 million years, longer than any dynasty of bone or feather that would come after. And then, like so many others, they were gone. Not erased, but folded into the next chapter, their forms becoming fossils, their absence becoming space for something new. The light grows warmer. If the planet keeps a kind of memory, it is written in stone and ash and the slow accumulation of sediment across eons. And within that memory, a pattern emerges, not of random loss, but of cyclical renewal, of tides that rise and fall across the vast ocean of time. The question is not whether life has ended before, but whether those endings follow a deeper order, a pulse beneath the chaos that we are only beginning to hear. Perhaps the earth does not grieve its extinctions, perhaps it breathes them. And so we turn now to what the record shows, to the evidence pressed into cliff faces and ocean floors, to the quiet testimony of rock that has witnessed more sunrises than any living thing could count. The story written there is older than wonder, older than fear. It is the story of a planet that has been composing and erasing its own symphony for 4.5 billion years, and in the spaces between movements, something like a pattern begins to emerge. The science of extinction is at its heart a science of absence. Paleontologists study what is no longer here, reading the gaps in the fossil record the way astronomers read the dark spaces between stars. And what they have found, over more than a century of careful excavation, is that life on Earth has not declined in a steady, predictable way. Instead, it has experienced sudden contractions, moments when the diversity of species collapsed in ways that cannot be explained by ordinary pressures alone. Most researchers recognize 5 major mass extinctions in the last 540 million years. The first occurred near the end of the Ordovician period, roughly 445 million years ago, when glaciers spread across the southern supercontinent and sea levels dropped, suffocating the shallow marine ecosystems that had thrived in warmer times. Evidence suggests that nearly 85% of marine species disappeared during this interval, their lineages folding quietly into the sediment. The light of mid-morning settles over the ocean. The second great dying came at the close of the Devonian, around 370 million years ago. The causes remain less certain. Some scientists believe that volcanic activity released gases that depleted oxygen in the seas, while others point to the spread of land plants, whose roots may have accelerated weathering and altered the chemistry of rivers flowing into the oceans. Whatever the mechanism, the result was the same: a profound reduction in the variety of life, particularly among the reef-building organisms that had shaped the underwater world. Then came the Permian, roughly 252 million years ago, and here the record becomes almost unbearable in its scope. Geologists call it the Great Dying, and the name is not hyperbole. Evidence from rock formations in Siberia and China suggests that volcanic eruptions on an almost unimaginable scale released carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere, warming the planet and acidifying the oceans over tens of thousands of years. Some estimates place the loss of marine species at more than 90%. The land fared little better. Forests vanished. Insects disappeared. The world became, for a time, a quieter and emptier place. The silence held. Yet even this was not the end. Life, in its patient way, returned. Different, altered, but persistent. The Triassic period that followed saw the rise of new forms, new experiments in scale and structure. Dinosaurs emerged from the margins. Mammals began their long, quiet vigil in the shadows. And then, at the close of the Triassic, another extinction swept through, clearing space once more. The pattern continued. The most famous of these events is, of course, the one that ended the Cretaceous 66 million years ago. Here, the evidence points strongly to an asteroid impact. A body perhaps 10 kilometers wide, striking the Yucatan Peninsula and sending shockwaves across the globe. Dust and debris darkened the skies for months, perhaps years. Photosynthesis faltered, food chains collapsed. The great reptiles that had dominated the planet for over 160 million years were gone within a geological instant. Noon holds steady over green water. What is remarkable, when one considers these events together, is not their devastation, but their regularity. Some researchers have proposed that mass extinctions follow a rough cycle, occurring every 26 to 30 million years on average. The hypothesis remains debated. Not all scientists agree that the pattern is statistically significant, but the possibility itself is striking. It suggests that the Earth may be subject to rhythms we do not yet fully understand, rhythms that arise from the planet's own geology, or from its journey through the galaxy, or from processes still hidden beneath the data. And here, the facts begin to thin, and the questions grow deeper. Beyond the record's edge, where the fossils fall silent and the numbers dissolve into estimation, a different kind of thinking begins. Not speculation for its own sake, but the kind of wondering that science invites when it reaches the limits of what can be measured. What if the extinctions were not merely responses to catastrophe, but expressions of something more fundamental, a rhythm embedded in the very mechanics of the Earth? Some studies propose that the planet's mantle convects in long, slow cycles, driving periods of intense volcanic activity at intervals of tens of millions of years. These plumes of heat, rising from the deep interior, could explain why extinction events seem to cluster in time, not because of cosmic coincidence, but because of the internal heartbeat of the planet itself. The Earth, in this view, is not a passive stage on which life performs, but an active participant, shaping the conditions for existence and dissolution alike. Dusk approaches, softening the edges of the hills. Other researchers have looked beyond the planet to the movement of the solar system through the Milky Way. As the Sun and its planets orbit the galactic center, they pass through regions of varying stellar density, through the spiral arms where gas and dust collect. Some have suggested that these passages could perturb the distant cloud of comets at the edge of the solar system, sending some of them tumbling inward, increasing the likelihood of impacts over geological timescales. The hypothesis is speculative, and many scientists remain cautious, but it opens a window onto a vision of extinction as part of a cosmic choreography, a dance between the Earth, its star, and the galaxy that contains them both. The light begins to dim, and yet perhaps the most compelling pattern is not found in any single cause, but in the relationship between them. The fossil record suggests that extinctions are often preceded by periods of environmental stress, climate shifts, sea level changes, volcanic emissions, that weaken ecosystems before a final blow arrives. It is as if the planet were preparing itself for transformation, loosening the old arrangements before something new could emerge. Scientists believe that this cascading vulnerability may be as important as any asteroid or eruption That extinction is not a single event but a process, a slow unraveling followed by a sudden release. Perhaps the earth was always tending toward renewal. In the mythologies of many cultures, destruction and creation are not opposites but partners. The old world must burn before the new one can rise. The seed must break before the root can grow. It is tempting, when contemplating the great extinctions, to see in them a similar logic. Not a cruelty of nature, but a necessity, a clearing of the ground so that fresh forms might find their place in the light. The shadows lengthen. Consider the mammals. For over 100 million years, they lived in the margins, small and nocturnal, waiting beneath the feet of giants. It was only after the Cretaceous extinction that they could expand into the empty niches, diversifying into whales and elephants and primates. Without the vanishing of the dinosaurs, the world we know could not have come to be. The loss was also an invitation, and so the pattern reveals itself, not as a record of failure, but as a rhythm of becoming. Each extinction is a door that closes and opens at once, a threshold between what was and what might be. The earth does not forget its dead. It folds them into the foundation of the next world, compressing their forms into coal and oil and the calcium of new shells. Nothing is truly lost, only transformed, returned to the slow circulation of matter and energy that has been turning since the planet first cooled from its molten birth. It may be more honest to imagine the extinctions not as wounds, but as breaths. Exhalations at the end of a long phrase, pauses before the next movement begins. The first stars appear. There is a kind of music in this, if we are willing to hear it. A rhythm that spans millions of years, too slow for any single life to perceive, but present nonetheless in the layered pages of the rock. The trilobites knew it, though they could not name it. The ammonites knew it. The great ferns and the armored fish and the creatures that have not yet been discovered in the stone, all of them moved to this rhythm, flourished within it, and were folded back into the silence when their time had passed. And perhaps we are no different. Perhaps we, too, are part of a phrase that will one day reach its end, making room for whatever comes next in the long, patient composition of the earth. The night deepens. When we stand at the edge of a canyon, looking down at the colored bands of sediment laid down over hundreds of millions of years, we are seeing time made visible, not as a line, but as a texture, a layered accumulation of presence and absence. Each stratum is a world unto itself, a record of skies and seas that no longer exist, of creatures that breathed and hunted and rested beneath stars that have since gone dark. What does it mean to belong to such a history? What does it mean to know that we are one chapter in a story that began long before us and will continue long after we are gone? The questions do not demand answers. They ask only that we sit with them, that we allow their weight to settle into our understanding the way sediment settles into stone. The stars turn slowly. Perhaps extinction is not the opposite of life, but its companion, the shadow that gives shape to the light. Every species that has ever existed has been defined, in part, by the absence of those that came before, by the niches left empty, by the possibilities that opened when older forms withdrew. We are the children of extinction, shaped by disappearances we cannot remember, carrying in our cells the legacy of survivors who found their way through the narrowing passages of deep time. And in this there is a strange kind of comfort, not the comfort of permanence, for nothing here is permanent, but the comfort of belonging to something larger than any single life, any single species, any single era. The earth has been composing its symphony for 4.5 billion years, and every creature that has ever lived has been a note in that composition, a brief vibration in the immense and ongoing hum. When stone forgets its shape, does it still remember heat? The question drifts unanswered, as questions of this kind must. But in the drifting, there is rest. In the not knowing, there is release. The moon rises, pale and patient. We are made of the same elements as the trilobites, the same carbon and calcium and water that have been cycling through the planet since its earliest days. When we breathe the same air that has been breathed by countless lungs, filtered through countless leaves, exhaled into countless skies. We are not separate from the rhythm of extinction and renewal. We are expressions of it, temporary forms in a pattern that has been unfolding since before the first cell divided. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps it is enough to know that we are part of the pattern, that our presence here is not an accident, but an inheritance, a continuation of something that began in the darkness before the first dawn, and will continue long after the last light fades. The night holds us gently. The stars are older now, their light grown soft, their positions familiar as breath. Somewhere beneath the ground, the planet turns on its slow axis, carrying us through the dark as it has carried every creature that ever lived, as it will carry whatever comes after. The extinctions are not behind us. They are woven into the fabric of time, part of the rhythm that makes renewal possible. And in the stillness of this late hour, there is nothing to fear in that knowledge, only a quiet recognition that we belong to something larger than ourselves, something patient and ongoing and full of possibility. The wind settles, the light dims to almost nothing. In the sediment below, the record continues, layer upon layer, silence upon silence, the long ledger of the earth filling with the traces of all that has been and all that will be. We cannot read it all, we cannot understand it all, but we can rest within it, trusting the rhythm that has sustained this planet through every ending and every beginning. The earth keeps breathing. So do we. And somewhere in the deep stone, a new chapter waits, unwritten, unhurried, as patient as the turning of the stars. Sleep now. The pattern holds.